No, you can leave. You can leave the mic up. You can leave your mic up. It's better to actually have everything up and running.
Okay.
You're on air, Pat.
Joel, you want to kill it? You have the wrong thing up on the card. Oh, it's the Give and Take Live with Tony. Why don't you kill it for a sec?
Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network, coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us and our new website, coalitionradionetwork.com. Tonight is special programming directed at the Libertarian Party and the worldwide libertarian community. Joining me for the first time at the Coalition in what's generally referred to as a AMA, Ask Me Anything, see, I'm hip to those things, is in fact Tony D'Orazio. He currently serves as the chairman of the Libertarian Party of the Empire State, the great state of New York. And the purpose of tonight is that he has newly announced, officially, that he is a candidate for the Libertarian National Committee chairmanship. These are tumultuous times for libertarians everywhere. We're dealing with existential challenges foisted upon us by the real world, the dreaded real world. Racial issues inflaming our country. COVID-19. An endemic, pandemic, depending on your perspective, roiling the world and the world's economies, and as importantly, the world's civil liberties, as well as internally, the Libertarian Party, as we seek guidance and solace, both simultaneously, in our search to refine our national convention, scheduled to take place just a week and a half or so from now. From now, what is considered one of the world's hotspots for COVID-19, Orlando, Florida. But there's a lot we want to talk about. I'm asking folks, I'll get started with a little bit of a conversation, but I'm asking folks, if you could, to post your questions in the Facebook live chat room, and we will certainly get into them as we share this program around the libertarian community. So, Tony, first of all, welcome to the show. It's great to finally meet you virtually, as it were.
Yes, thanks for having me, Pat. I'm really happy to have the opportunity.
So, one of the things I always start out with, if you will, is always, it's almost formulaic to a little bit, but I want to know two things. What I call your libertarian moment, that moment in history, if you will, when you decided that you had found the libertarian perspective. And number two, just give us a little bit of your background and how you found the libertarian movement in general.
Oh, yeah, you know what? They're pretty much the same story. So I'm glad. It's a great question. I love telling the story. So I was a Democrat out of college. I know that some of the newer libertarians are thinking, "Oh, but I came from the Republican Party. How could you come from the left?" you can. The Democrats of the 90s and the Democrats of today aren't the same party. But at any rate, it was the mid 90s. Bill Clinton was the candidate. He was running against Ross Perot, who was extreme, and Bob Dole, and I really couldn't get behind any of those candidates. So I started researching candidates and researching other parties. And one of the parties that I stumbled upon was the Libertarian Party and Harry Brown, who I read his platform. And when the first time I read it, it wasn't his platform per se. It was an online questionnaire that he had done. Choose between these candidates, all the candidates, including the fringe ones that you've never heard of, the Joe Exotics of the world, if you will, had taken this quiz. He had taken it and just reading through some of his answers. What would you do with the IRS? Abolish it. The Department of Defense, abolish it. Just a whole bunch of abolish first day. And my first reading through, I went, you can't do that. And then my second reading, it's like, well, maybe you can do some of that. So I liked what he was saying. It was kind of scary at first reading, and it took me a couple readings to kind of get with it. I wanted to learn more about the Libertarian Party. So one night after work, I was sitting at my desk at work, done for the day. It was about 5:15. I started searching online. I used Yahoo. This was in the days before Google, and I found the Libertarian Party of New York had a website and a phone number. So I said, you know what, I'm going to call them. I'll get on their mailing list. I'll get their material in the mail. So I called, dialed the number. Phone is answered by a woman named Dottie Lou Brokaw, who was the vice chair of the party at the time. She was a gubernatorial and lieutenant gubernatorial candidate, and those of you listening from New York who have been with the party for a while know exactly who Dottie Lou Brokaw is. We had a conversation for a good hour and a half about civil liberties in this country, the Brown Jorgensen platform. She made sure she mentioned both Harry Brown and Joe Jorgensen, who was his vice presidential candidate and is now our presidential candidate. And after that phone call, after talking about Harry Brown and getting some recommendations for some books to read, including Harry Brown's book, Why Government Doesn't Work, I was hooked, and I've been voting Libertarian ever since.
What was that campaign like? There are a lot of us who weren't with the movement at that time, and we really don't have we've lost a lot of this institutional knowledge, which is a concern for me. The sense is that in some ways we're repeating some of the same mistakes that were made 1, 2, 3 generations of libertarians ago. Give us a little background. Give us a little sense of how it was.
Well, in some sense we are, but media is different today. So I would say that in some ways we're not. Harry Brown wasn't getting a lot of media, so I had to really seek out information on the man. His book was in the library, so that was nice. I was able to find his website, which I think is still alive with a lot of his old articles, and I encourage anybody to go seek him out and read him. I feel like Harry Brown has been, although we respect him in the party, I think a lot of what he said, especially on the economy, has been forgotten to history. But it was difficult to follow the campaign. Now he ended up getting about 500,000 votes that time, because people were so disenfranchised with the two major parties, plus the third candidate who was really a candidate of the two major parties. But it wasn't a campaign where we were doing sign waves and a whole lot of standing on corners. Yeah, we were doing some door knocking, and we were doing some of that stuff, but I never once saw a Harry Brown sign on somebody's lawn. I think we're learning. I think we've learned some of the lessons from that, and we're starting to market ourselves a little bit more like a political party traditionally does, as well as using the new media that's available to us, like social media, to really broaden the reach and bring it to an audience that would not see anything about our candidates otherwise.
As we try to break through new media, which in one sense represents so much opportunity because there is so much content that you can provide for people, and there's so much content that, quite frankly, sits on the sideline because of the challenge of breaking through what I call the white noise of media. Do we need to be more provocative in our marketing and our messaging?
Provocative, I don't think so. The thing about marketing, and I think any marketing person will tell you this, is that there's no one way to market. I think there's a place for provocative marketing when it's targeted to an audience that will respond to it. I wouldn't necessarily put up a billboard about, for example, sex work being work outside a Christian conservative conference. I wouldn't necessarily say that every piece of marketing we put out is provocative. I think it needs to be principles based, but there are certainly ways to get to our principles that are not jumping in the deep end head first. And I think there's a place for both types of marketing. I don't necessarily think we have to be provocative.
Let's then start, in a sense, from the beginning.
Okay.
How do you define what you believe to be the role of the Libertarian National Committee chairman, its responsibilities, and give us, in a sense, sort of a resume, a job, or better yet, a job description?
Okay, I'll do my best. I'll be honest. I'm learning more about the job as I've applied for it. But I'll tell you what I've always known, and that's the number one job of the chair is when you talk about the chair, the chairman, it's the chairman of the board, the chair of the party, the business side of the party. So keeping the lights on, making sure the organization survives, grows is responsible. If this was an organization that had shareholders, I would have shareholder responsibility. We're an organization with members, so I'm responsible to the members for keeping the party open. So that's the boring stuff. The business continuity, the IT, the HR, the budget, the boring stuff is job number one. And I think a lot of people forget that that's job number one because that's not the flashy part of the job. There is a piece of the job where the chair needs to be a facilitator to the quarterly meetings of the LNC, as well as other meetings that may have to occur. We all know that the LNC are filled with the most passionate members of the party, so they can sometimes be a little contentious.
Rambunctious?
Rambunctious is another word. But I don't necessarily look at that as a bad thing. I see that as passion, but uncontrolled passion can sometimes be damaging. The chair needs to keep it in a more productive state. The chair needs to be the cheerleader for the party when called upon to do so. Like it or not, the media, when they come looking for a public face for the party, in a presidential year, they'll look for the presidential candidate, and in a non-presidential year, they'll come look for the chair. So speaking the party, defending the principles, talking to the principles is another important aspect of the party. Those are the major roles that I see the chair performing. The business side, the facilitator side, and the cheerleader and representative figurehead side.
Okay. There are those, and we saw this at the time of the presidential nominations, who are critical of people, and you're not the only one, but you're critical, who's joined us perhaps late in the campaign, if you will. There are people who are critical of that. What is your motivation for running for LNC chair? What is your motivation for joining now? And in particular, you've got an intriguing motto, if you will, a fresh start. Tell us about
fresh start. Yeah. Oh, sure. So to kind of bring it back, about a year ago, I first started flirting with the idea of, hey, maybe I'm going to run for LNC, maybe vice chair, maybe an at-large position. And I started talking to some of the people in my circles about it and about the responsibilities of the position and would I be a good fit. And universally, the answer was, yeah, you'd be a great fit, but don't do it because the LNC is an ineffective organization. So at that time, I dropped it and decided to be dedicated to New York. I was vice chair at the time. I'm chair now, and growing the party here. And I still am. Fast forward to about early May. As chair of the party, now I'm chair of the New York party, I'm starting to see some of the COVID-19 problems that have hit. I've seen the COVID-19 problems that have hit our state. We have a national convention coming up. I have serious concerns about seating a delegation there. So I start speaking up calmly, not contentiously, not accusing anybody of anything, but speaking up and talking about these issues that are affecting New Yorkers specifically. And some people who others might find divisive, I have gotten along with great. And we've had civilized conversations even when we've disagreed. So during that virtual convention, I led the New York delegation to 100% enrolled votes every single time. I'm very proud of that. And then we saw just how much contentiousness and factionalism was going on during that online convention. So after that happened, I, one day got cranky, and I started mouthing off at one of the chair candidates. And because I'm human, we do that. We argue, we mouth off at each other, and then we get along. We mend the fences. Somebody else saw this and said, "Hey Tony, why aren't you running for chair?" About this time, the no incumbents for LNC movement started growing, and another person who in my libertarian circles who I refer back to an awful lot, and frankly, I'm doing his show tomorrow, Larry Sharp. I had a conversation with him, and whereas a year ago he was one of the people who told me not to run. This time he was encouraging me to run because we need a reboot on the LNC. So hence the a fresh start. Putting people that have been in the middle of this divisive environment in charge of the LNC isn't really fair to them, and it isn't fair to the LNC. Putting people that are dedicated to factions, be it the Mises people, the Prags, the Radicals, I don't care. I get along with them all. But putting people in charge of one of those factions, in charge of the party, is going to sow division. And we need someone that's going to bring a fresh start, that isn't going to care about the factions, that's going to care about growing this party, keeping the lights on, keeping the water running, getting us elected, getting us on the ballot, growing our membership, fundraising, growing our income, and not worrying about factions, and not sowing the divisiveness.
It's almost become an intra-party joke, and there's some pretty funny caucuses out there. And of course, as a proud member, one of the earliest members of the Waffle House Caucus, I stand true and proud, and I oppose IHOPs at all opportunities. So there's a lot of humor in it, but
oh sure,
but have the caucus structure themselves at times detrimental to I'll call it just the spirit of the party?
I think they started off with good intentions. When I was several years ago, when the Pragmatist Caucus started growing, I looked at them and I liked some of the things they were doing from a policy standpoint and from a promoting candidate standpoint, and taking a practical look at the application of libertarianism. And I thought, this is kind of neat. And then I started to see advertisements coming from both the radicals and the prags, where they showed the old world's smallest political quiz we've all seen at the Diamond, where the tippy top is where we're all aiming for, because that's libertarian and pure libertarianism, and the prags had a shaded top of the Diamond, and it said this is good enough or something like that. I don't remember what the exact words. And the radicals had one where just the top Diamond was shaded in. And so, and in my opinion, both of those types of libertarians are important, but right now we have those two libertarians, and that's just one example, just at war with each other. We're starting to see that factionalism grow, be it whether it's because of discontent with the leader, or I don't like this particular application of principle, so I'm going to advocate for this application of principle. I'm not going to go into particular planks that might be in place that are probably going to come up for debate again. And it's sowing divisiveness in a party, and this is a time when we need to not be divided. We're all in the top half of that Diamond. We're all in the top. We're all very high up in that Diamond. We all believe in these same ideals. We need to be pulling in the same direction.
Interesting. Folks, we're just going to put it out there. If you're just joining us, Tony D'Orazio, he's the chairman of the Libertarian Party of New York. He is a newly announced candidate to be the chairman of the Libertarian National Committee, in a sense, if you will, the leader of our party. And it's interesting because Nick Sarwark often describes it as the least important job in the party. What's your reflection on that? I'm sure you've heard him say that. It's one of his keynotes.
I have heard him say that. And you know what? I get it. I get why he says it. It should be the least important job in the party. But at the same time, it's not. If you're looking at one little aspect of that job, the facilitator aspect, or the figurehead aspect, yeah, that's the least important part. But keeping the lights on and the business running is the most important job in the party. It just shouldn't be the dictator of the party, if you will. We don't need a dictator. We need somebody who understands the gravity and importance of the job that he's doing without letting the gravity and importance of the job he's doing go to his head.
Right. There's a Nebraskan libertarian that I respect very much, a guy named Dave Demarest. He's been with the movement a long time. He has served on the LNC. He often talks about recognizing, if you will, the gleam in the eye that someone has for office, where the pursuit of the office becomes tantamount to everything for that individual.
Sure.
Have you felt that? And do you feel that's a big problem, a burden, as well as an obstacle to success to bringing people together for that fresh start?
So do I think that people's drive to get to office is an obstacle to that? Yeah. I would hope not. It's not for me. I look at my opponents in this race, and I have, I believe there are 5 other declared opponents and 3 that are getting some, 3 others that are getting some play. I consider them to be opponents. I don't consider them to be bad people. I don't consider them to be my enemies. I consider them to be my opponents in this one little race. And once this race is over, we're working together again. We're going to be pulling together. And frankly, before this race is over, we'll probably be working together on other stuff too, because we're doing the important work in the party right now. All of us are. And I don't... I'm going to put this out there right now. I know that a lot of people are run the chair's race and then, well, oh, you're going to nominate me for vice chair. Okay, I'll accept that nomination. Or, oh, you're going to nominate me for at-large. I'll accept that nomination. I'll decline those nominations. I'm running for chair. I'm not running for anything else. I'm not pursuing just getting myself on the LNC. I'm running for chair. And I'm dedicated to that race that I'm running for chair. If I don't win chair, I will consider running for chair again in the future. I'm running for chair.
So your single purpose is really to act as a uniter of a party, and I'll use my words, that may be so balkanized, if you will, if you're a history buff, that it's difficult for us at times to come together on that sort of project by project basis that I believe libertarians should be pursuing. You think balkanized is too strong a word?
I love that word. That's a great word. I hope that by the end of my first quarter as your LNC chair, we won't be using that word anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ambitious.
No, absolutely. And it's okay to be ambitious. And it's okay to be, if in fact the target of that ambition is the larger success of the organization. If I'm reading between the lines here, if that ambition is in fact personal advancement with a thought to pushing forward the ambitions of the organization, that's when it becomes a problem?
Right, and I'm not doing this for my own personal advancement. I'm running because I believe in this party. I'm running because I believe in this organization. I don't have presidential aspirations. I don't have vice presidential aspirations. Somebody might try to talk me into that at some point. I have aspirations to grow this party, and that's it. So once I've done my job as chair, I will gladly hand it over to someone else who will hopefully do as good a job as I'm going to do.
Excellent. I see that we have a bunch of folks who are watching and listening, if you will. If you're just joining us, Tony D'Orazio, he's a candidate for the LNC chairmanship. He currently serves as the chairperson of the great state of New York Libertarian Party, the Empire State. So let's go through some of the areas in which chairmen are traditionally associated. How important is the vision thing? And what is your vision for the party in your term, if elected as chairman?
How important is the vision thing? The vision is important. One of the first things I'll be doing as a party is sitting us all down as an LNC at that first meeting. I'm going to bore them because we are going to write a mission statement for this party, what we want to accomplish. What I think our vision should be is growing the party, grow the movement. That's it. Grow the party, grow the movement. That's my vision. I'm not a dictator, so if somebody has more to add to that, I am open to it. And I think at that first meeting, we are going to have that conversation.
Okay. In terms of growing the party, and this is very often the case when folks run for a variety of positions with the LNC.
Sure.
They want to grow the party. They want to grow the movement. We all do. What are some specific actions that you believe need to happen quickly in order to actually start us back down that road, as opposed to the sort of calcified mess, my words, that we are right now?
That's a great question. So there are several areas that we need to focus on. Day one, we have the resources we have what we have. So we need to look at what we're doing from an LP staff standpoint, where we can streamline from a process standpoint. I'm going to charge the executive director to look at process, to look at streamlining process. I'm not going so far as to saying I want to do a forensic audit of the books, because I'm not qualified to do that. But we need to be doing more with what we've got. We need to be utilizing our resources better. We're not utilizing resources well. Marketing, and that's both internal and external marketing, is something that we need to focus on. External marketing, we need to make sure that our doors, the doors to the Libertarian Party, we're a big tent. We need to make sure that those doors are fully visible from the ivory towers to the Democrats and Republicans. We need accessible marketing that they can see, that they can understand. We need to show them the path. Internal marketing, we have way too many people who, the second they don't like something the LNC is doing publicly, or somebody in the LNC is doing publicly, just throw up their hands and say, I'm out of here. You'll never see me do that, by the way. Not seriously. In frustration, maybe. I'll flip over some tables. But we need to start, as an LNC, telling the party to the best of our ability. There are a lot of things that the LNC does that are confidential, contract negotiations, HR matters, that we can't. But in general, we need to be better at telling the party what we're doing, and that needs to be a lot more than the newsletter that we put out every quarter. I love it. I read that newspaper. It takes me about 5 minutes to read it, and then I don't get anything from the national party for another quarter, except for an occasional fundraising email. Now let's go to fundraising because it's important. Remember how I said at the beginning of this all, we have the resources we have. We've been losing donors. We've lost a lot of donors in the last couple of years from this party because of some people in the party who have been, we'll call it provocative. I'm not going to name names, but there have been a couple of former members of the LNC who have driven people out of the party, or nearly driven people out of the party. We need to start wooing them back. They left because of a personality. They didn't leave because they magically didn't become libertarian anymore. We need to show them. We need direct outreach to them. We have a development director. We have somebody who's supposed to be doing this on the LP staff level, and I'm going to be having a conversation with her as chair to get her in this direction, get her in the mindset of, let's get the big donors back. Let's get some of that money that used to be dependable income back into the party. Another piece of specific outreach, another specific plan that I have is I'm going to start speaking with candidates and politicians, not just Justin Amash and the libertarians we have elected, although I'm absolutely going to talk to all of them. We need to attract candidates who are closely in line with us, more so than they are to the duopoly, and convince them that we are the better, more viable choice. We're not going to do that if we're sitting there with 100th of the budget. We're not going to do there if we're not a lean, mean, organized, smart body. That's just a few of my initiatives, spitballing them.
Absolutely. Talk to me about the responsibilities as you see them that the chair has and the executive director. Can you sort of differentiate them and sort of put them each in their own lanes as you see them?
So the executive director is responsible for the day-to-day happenings of the LP staff. So what happens in the office in Alexandria, that's Mr. Fishman's responsibility. So he's got a staff there that reports to him. He reports to the chairman of the board, which will be me. It's my responsibility to make sure that the party business is running smoothly enough. Supervising the executive director is certainly one of my jobs. I need to be able to trust him to push my vision forward. Sometimes that means going around him and talking to some of the people who report to him. But my job is more of a strategic job, whereas Dan's job would be more functional and operational.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like the strategic element and conversations to that effect, whether it be in person, digitally, but a formal approach to that strategic vision has been encouraged in the LNC? Is that something that's present now? Or do you, like so many people, consider that MIA?
I think a lot of that strategic vision is being done ad hoc. I think that has come to light quite a bit in the last couple of months as we've run into a pandemic and a convention. So I want to preface everything that I'm about to say by giving great props to what the convention organizing committee has accomplished, the remote capabilities, the remote convention that we had, as dilatory as we all thought that was, the remote capabilities that they are working to put in for those people who can't travel. They are doing a fantastic job. And they started it in March. And I know this by a couple of conversations I had. That's too late. There hasn't been any sort of contingency planning. As I've kind of talked to some of the members of staff and some of the volunteers of the party, who are privy to some of these things, I've asked a few questions. And I'm an IT guy by trade. I was a systems administrator for years. I'm a CIO for hire now. One of the questions I asked is, okay, so what happens if there's a fire in Alexandria to our data? And the answer I'm getting is crickets. That type of strategic planning where we don't even have a business continuity plan, not in place. We have no business continuity measures in place where a staff member could leave or die and we could lose data, or we could lose a state affiliate and we could lose data. No, we haven't been looking at things strategically at all. We've been doing everything ad hoc and reactive, and we need to start doing that type of planning.
And does that direction come from the LNC chair? Or I should say at least a fulmination of it?
It shouldn't, but the chair should be the champion of it. Mm-hmm. because the chair has the fiduciary responsibility, the responsibility for keeping the business of the party running. He needs to take ownership.
Right. So you brought up the C word, convention. So let's clear the air. You did. I didn't. You did. But let's clear the air on that.
I did.
And get that out there. There have been a number of new developments today. The tri-state area, and it's of course incredibly pretentious for those of us who live in or like me are from the tri-state area, because we just assume that those are the really only tri-state area that matters, right? New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. Wow. But and yes, I'm an alumni.
Pennsylvania's sitting over there going, hey, you kind of have to drive through us. Yeah. We're the shortcut between New Jersey and New York.
Right. But they announced today some additional travel restrictions in terms of folks coming back from any one of a number of states. And interestingly enough, rather than focus on picking out the states, they actually, as a group, set up a standard in terms of a number of statistics, excuse me, which I thought was intriguing because it went beyond that Rhode Island, New York debate that we were just commiserating about just a few months ago when we first met. Yep. And they have laid down the gauntlet, if you will. Once and for all, do you think that we should be conducting an in-person convention in a week and a half when you've got these increasing threat of a significant reemergence, actually the reemergence that's already happened, of this disease?
Mm-hmm. For so many reasons, and not just because of the fact that it's a risk. No, we absolutely should not be having an in-person convention at this time. We need an in-person event at some point. We do not need an in-person convention in early July. We do not need an in-person convention in early July in what is becoming an increasing hotspot. I'm not a fan of these travel bans. I need to be very clear. I'm not a fan of what Governor Cuomo has done in New York in shutting us down. I think there's a lot of nanny state mentality that he employs. and he employs people who agree with his nanny state mentality. But that's the situation we're in now. So the fact is, Florida is quarantining people who travel from New York or New Jersey or Connecticut for 14 days. They're requiring you to quarantine, and right now I can hear every Florida resident on your podcast going, but they're not enforcing that. Except I'm hearing today that they are. I'm hearing today that there's surveillance on the roads coming into Florida, specifically I-95, that they are checking at airports and they are enforcing the quarantine. So that's a 14-day quarantine on the way down there. 14 days or the length of your stay. So, boy, I hope you didn't want to see outside and are staying right in the Rosen Center, where, by the way, if you're part of the convention package, you can still check in. But if you're not, they are not accepting guests from New York, New Jersey, or Connecticut. Now I have to come back home and quarantine myself again for 14 days. So that's potentially an entire month that I have to quarantine. That's not practical for most members of the party. And you're looking at almost 100 delegates from those 3 states. Now we use this convention, or we traditionally have every 4 years. This is when we get ourselves on C-SPAN. This is when we get James Weeks up on stage to start dance. I'm kidding, James, don't do that. But this is when we get some of the biggest publicity for our party. And I can almost guarantee that C-SPAN isn't going to show up in Florida in the middle of a pandemic. We are going to show up on the news, and we are going to be seen as an irresponsible group of citizens, whether we believe that or not, no matter what we believe, whether you believe it's a pandemic or this is a real thing. And for the record, I believe it's real. But it doesn't matter. We are going to be seen and portrayed as irresponsible, right-wing, because that's what the media is going to say, jerks. We can't afford that level of negative publicity at this point in our history. We do need an in-person event, a big old pep rally for the Jorgensen-Cohen campaign. But we do not need to have an in-person event in Florida in early July. It's irresponsible. It's a bad public relations move. And it's not practical for a great number of members of the party.
I want you to really expound on something because you touched on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it, in fact, possible, for all the reasons you just mentioned, to oppose an in-person campaign? And to your point,
Mm-hmm.
one need only look at the treatment the Trump campaign was accorded based on their attempts to hold an event, and ultimately did hold an event in Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
So is it possible to oppose an in-person convention and still oppose the power of the omnipotent state to try and wrest away our civil liberties by some of the more egregious actions people like Governor Cuomo have engaged in?
Absolutely, it's two separate issues. They just happen to both be related to coronavirus. Governor Cuomo has used an opportunity here to enforce regulations on this state that should not have been enforced. That doesn't mean that the measures that he is putting in place are the wrong things to do. It means that he shouldn't be using the force of the state and ultimately creating a fundraising vehicle for the state to force us to comply.
Do you believe that some of the terms accorded to the Trump campaign because of their event in Oklahoma City will be accorded to us by the same media?
I do. I don't think we'll get nearly as much attention because we're not the president, but we will get attention. We will probably be treated with less respect and more ridicule than Trump was. Plain and simple. Oh, look at those crazy libertarians. Whereas Trump is seen as dangerous and powerful. We're not. We're just crazy libertarians. It will be much easier to dismiss us.
You're chairman of arguably one of the 2 or 3, I'll just say, most metropolitan, if you will, states in the nation. You are chairman of a political party in a state for which you can argue to say that is one of the 2 epicenters of the national media.
Yep.
You've just finished, in part because of the efforts of the party in conjunction with Larry Sharpe, in engaging in ultimately a successful campaign for ballot access. Something that, unfortunately, is part of the life of every practicing libertarian, every big L libertarian. It's just part of our DNA at this point.
It is.
Does that type of behavior by the media, because again, you are at the center of the storm, have the potential to wreck or at least eat away some of the hard-won gains that were made by people in your party supporting, and other parts of the Libertarian Party too, but supporting Mr. Sharpe's extensive journeys, if you will, around a state that is enormous in multiple respects? Does that have the opportunity to cause that type of existential damage?
It does have that opportunity. It especially has that opportunity in areas that are, shall we say, more favorable to Governor Cuomo, which would be New York City. We already struggle to get media attention in the 5 boroughs. This isn't going to help. In Western New York, it might affect him a little bit less. Western New York tends to be a little bit more red. For those who don't know New York, we've been for every election since 1988, maybe even 84. I don't know if Mondale carried the state, but definitely Dukakis did. This state has gone blue. But if you go county by county, you'll see the state looks red because more than half the population is in the New York City metropolitan area. So that's a really important segment of the population, and losing media in that area and losing the national media there would be devastating to the party. And Larry was successful in getting us national media there. Larry has been very successful in getting media in Western New York, and has had some measures of success getting us national media and some measure of success getting us attention in the New York metropolitan area. We're going to lose a lot of that if we do something as irresponsible as hold a convention in Central Florida during a pandemic.
Folks, again, if you're just joining us, Tony DiRazio is the chairman of the Libertarian Party of the great state of New York, the Empire State, if you will. And he's joining us tonight with sort of an Ask Me Anything. We'll get into a couple of questions in just a minute. Let's pivot away from the convention. I think your point was well made. It's loud, and it was very, very clear. Coming out of this convention, or hopefully some form of pep rally, whatever you like to call it at some point in the future, nationally, we've got a challenge in that we've got an outstanding presidential and vice presidential candidate. But at the same time, they may not have that national name appeal that the approach of the 2 governors did. Now, this is my personal opinion, not the personal opinion of station management, but quite frankly,
sure,
I happen to believe, as much as I admire Gary Johnson on a personal level, he is the reason why I'm a member of the Libertarian Party and why I've become an activist in the Libertarian Party. So let there be no doubt the degree with which I admire Gary Johnson. But our 2 candidates this time represent, I believe, a much more insightful, a much more intense perspective, if you will, of the beliefs, the platform, and the philosophy of the libertarian movement. How important is it now, and how much is at stake if we don't unify between and behind these two candidates. And literally, as soon as this show is over, get out and leave our little comfort zone, leave our little bubble, leave Planet Libertarian, and go out and be apostles, literally, for these two individuals.
I hope all you libertarians have been doing that already. I see this ticket. You talk about them being great for us philosophically, great representatives of our principles, and yet they are two candidates that are very different people. They're very different in their expression of that. They're very different in their personification of that. They're very different in their application of that. And we need to, first of all, as a party, we need to be shouting that from the rooftops. Hey, look, we have a ticket that's a big tent, and yet still very principled. So that's very important to us. The Jorgensen-Cohen campaign is certainly not as easy a sell to a national audience as Johnson-Weld. Johnson, first of all, had a run 4 years prior, so we had a little bit of name recognition off that already. You've got two experienced executives running for office. Whether we liked them as libertarians or not, and I know that people were mixed on Johnson and absolutely not at all mixed on Weld, but but
that's an understatement.
No matter, especially now.
Yes,
I've met Bill Weld too. I actually think he's a very nice man. I just don't think he's quite a libertarian. Not quite.
I met Bill Weld. I met Bill Weld in Rhode Island, threw them the hell out of the state. But that's another conversation.
Yeah, that's funny. No, I met him at the 2018 New York State Convention. He was there for Larry Sharp's nomination for governor, and did some fundraising for Larry later that night. The guy can fundraise. He had some very good points, and I was very disappointed to see him go. But I was also very disappointed to see that this party nominated him for vice president after what he did to New York in 2006. And if anybody really wants to hear about that, I'm happy to talk about that. But I've gotten off topic here. Jorgensen and Cohen don't have that experience. I mean, professor at Clemson and podcaster / entrepreneur aren't government executives. So we're going to have to work hard as a party to sell them, and we're going to have to sell them on their principles. We're going to have to sell their leadership ability, and that's on us. I actually think they're going to do okay. Certainly, I would love to see them win. Practically, that's a big hill. I would love to see them match the Johnson-Weld numbers because those were great. Those numbers ensured us ballot access in a number of states where it was in jeopardy, and got us national attention. And we've got a bit of the deck stacked against us this year because we have, I mean, how many of us around the country are still stuck in our homes and not going anywhere and not door knocking and not doing those signways? How many of those outreach events that we did 4 years ago for Johnson and Weld are canceled this year? It's a tougher road. We have to work harder. It's going to be a harder campaign, and it's not going to be successful if we don't have every libertarian, and I mean every libertarian, no matter what faction you're from, what caucus you're from, pulling in the same direction.
And that is an understatement. It's just critical that we move beyond this sort of Game of Thrones that's going on over internal positions, which is extended, in my personal opinion, way beyond its useful point, and that we get together right now and move the campaign forward. We do have some questions here. Jason is asking,
"Oh, great!
What is the actual stance of the party on the abolition of the NFA, will we ever be able to privately own machine guns again?
Will we able to? Will we be able to? Sure, as soon as we get enough libertarian congressmen and senators to repeal that law, or a strong enough court challenge and a Supreme Court that's supportive of it. Right now, there's not public appetite for it. Of course, the Libertarian Party believes that we shouldn't have an NFA, that it shouldn't exist, that would be a direct violation of the phrase "shall not be infringed." But the truth is, public appetite isn't there right now. It's incumbent upon us to be the champions for it, because the politicians in Washington aren't.
Another question, if you will. How important is it for you to move forward that which Nick Sarwark, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, Nick Sarwark started this term, to get access to and to be involved in on national media?
It is something that the national chair is called upon to do. I won't shy away from it. I think we need to look at alternative media sources. I would rather see our candidates get the national media attention. I'd rather see our candidates be the ones who are interviewed, who get in front of cameras. I'm supposed to be the one who's standing behind them, holding them up and making sure that we have a party behind them. I'll certainly have no problem having those conversations and being the champion for the party, but it's not my primary job.
Here's another one. With regard to LNC, Big L, National Libertarian Party, social media, and of course, in all these questions, I'm paraphrasing. These are things that are coming through the chat, and also people have emailed me a couple of questions. But what will your social media strategy be? And how important is it that we start actually putting libertarian candidates up on national libertarian social media?
I think that especially some of our bigger candidates, and our winnable candidates, and they're each a little different. I say bigger candidates in bigger races. So I'm looking at statewide elections for executive office. I'm looking at gubernatorial elections, basically. I'm looking at congressional and Senate races that are being run seriously. They should be highlighted. And I say that because those races tend to be expensive. And by highlighting them on our social media, we can help drive fundraising to them and to us. It's a win-win for everybody. Now, as important as the office of water board trustee might be to a certain county or township, that's not going to get us national play. That's not going to get us attention. I would encourage state parties to really push hard their state and local candidates, because those are more important to them. Not that they're not important to the national party, not that we won't celebrate their victories when we get those victories, but we need to look at utilizing our social media as our marketing, our outreach, and also our fundraising.
I know one of the questions that I brought up several times in the past year or so was the near obsession we seem to have with promoting Republicans on social media, sometimes at the absence of our own libertarian candidates, because the prevailing thought was that if we promote Republicans, they'll like us and join us. I have yet to see many Republicans stick with us through an entire campaign. Every 4 years, we were treated to the notion that Republicans are going to finally make that conversion, and somehow, and I'll use the Snoopy and Lucy analogy, Lucy seems to always take that football away. Do you think we become friendly, if you will, by trying to either homogenize our product or make it more Republican friendly? Does that attract people who are really fervent about taking the Big L and moving it forward?
I think I think it is a good thing to point out when members of other parties that are not our party are doing things that reflect libertarian principles. If I'll name a couple of them. When Thomas Massey starts talking about fiscal responsibility and wanting to end the Fed, we should support that as libertarians and make sure that we say we are supporting this as libertarians. When a Tulsi Gabbard wants to end regime change wars worldwide, we support that as libertarians. We need to stand up and be proud of our platform and make those candidates come to us, not us go to them. We need to make sure that we are an attractive home, and we need to make sure that the duopoly sees that we are an attractive home that shares some of their ideals, and frankly, in some cases, we might be a better home for them than the GOP in their case. But by us sitting there constantly begging them, we don't look like we're a better home. We're not showing them our principles, we're showing them our desperation. We need to show our principles. We need to put those front and center. But I certainly have no problem with us trumpeting. Yeah, I know, I said it. The individual actions of particular politicians, no matter what party they're in. It's good to find those intersect points. That's how we're going to get people in. Oh, look, our ideals intersect with yours here. Do you differ with your party's ideals out over here? Maybe you agree with ours over here. It's gonna crack open the door so they'll peek in.
But do you think, and I'll challenge you just a little bit on this, twofold.
Please do.
Do we do a good enough job as a national party? And by the way, I participate in something called LPTV, which Dan and Nick brought to fruition. And I'm proud to say that every week on Fridays, 8 o'clock Eastern, we have 2 down ballot candidates from around the country. And we've had several folks on from New York because the New York chairman keeps calling me and giving me candidates to put on that I have to put on. Okay.
Yeah. He's got more for you, by the way.
Right. And by the way, other chair people, when you hear this, there's a lesson there. If you make it easy for your candidates to suddenly appear before us, there is a tiny squeaky wheel element of that. I'll just put that out there. Although this week coming up, we have a young woman from Hawaii who's going to be joining us, and I look forward to that. The westernmost libertarian candidate on the planet, and she's wonderful. So stay tuned. But that being said, there seems to be. I mean, you had several folks running for Congress in New York. Last night was your primary night. All right.
Yes.
You know, I got to meet Dwayne Whitmer, for example. Great guy. Interviewed a few other folks. I don't want to exclude them. But it strikes me that we've got a social media presence that is significant. We're not the biggest,
we do.
But folks have worked very hard over a number of years to build that social media presence. At what point in time do we start aggressively using the Facebook and the Twitter to promote individual libertarian candidates? It seems like there's a near absence of that.
The state parties are doing it better than national, and I think we do it now, especially our statewide candidates and our federal candidates. We need to do it now. Those are our opportunities. Those are the places where we can make big splashes, especially since we have a libertarian congressman right now. We have a caucus in Congress right now. We need to be working to grow that. The national party should be promoting congressional candidates on their social media on a national basis. It's going to help them with exposure. It's going to help with fundraising. It's going to help us with fundraising. There's so many reasons. And by the way, Pat, want to give you a little bit of heads up. I've watched LPTV quite a bit, and you do a great job with those candidates. For a lot of those candidates, it's their first media coverage, and it's a great growth opportunity. A lot of our candidates, even in those gigantic races, are running their first races ever. Dwayne Whitmer, the one you spoke of, by the way, he won his primary last night. This is his first campaign ever. and he's running a gigantic campaign in a nationally in a race with national implications that's making national news. His first interviews were terrible. His first time he was in front of the camera, he was wooden and was doing this. But he's gotten better because he's gotten practice. Likewise, by having practice like LPTV, by having these things available to our candidates, it helps them learn how to market themselves, get them more comfortable talking to media.
And the only way you do that, you're right, is by practice and experience. You can do it in front of your friends. You can do it in front of the mirror. It's being thrown into live moments like that allow you to create your talking points, your message, your stump speech, whatever you want to call it. Those are not concessions, if you will, to everyday politics. Having an effective stump speech is the most fundamental practice particularly in a COVID/digital media environment. And our inability to provide that service, our inability to train people on that. And we've got some wonderful people working in the party. I'm not diminishing their efforts, whatever. Folks like Cara and Apollo and the entire group are to me just legendary for what they've been able to accomplish on the budget that they've been handed in the circumstances which they've been presented. But to me, if there's value in the national party, it's being able to coalesce those resources that small affiliates may or may not be able to have the funding for, and to give those candidates the tools and the experience that they need so that they can go forth, like Dwayne, and every candidate, by the way, I've met who's come on the show are just out. I want people to walk away tonight with a message of hope. And if folks haven't seen these candidates in motion, they flower before our eyes. Our bench is astonishing. And to those folks that say, we don't have a libertarian bench, balderdash. We do. They're out there doing a lot of it on their own, and they deserve better. And they deserve a national party that supports them. And I think people are trying. We just have to step it up, all of us collectively. And by the way, kudos again to Dan and Nick for thinking up that product and getting it into place. And as simple as it is, I hope it is effective. And I appreciate your kind words. We've only got a few minutes left. I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy. You got a question? Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that's something I deal with in New York on a regular basis because when you think of libertarian candidates, who do you think of? The first name you think of after maybe you've thought of a presidential candidate is Larry Sharpe.
Right.
And one of my favorite, and usually it's Larry Sharpe for president, Larry Sharpe for vice president, Larry Sharpe move to my state and run for governor, Larry Sharpe run against AOC, Larry Sharpe run for a dog catcher. We don't need Larry Sharpe to run for everything. We need 1,000 Larry Sharpes, and we are on our way to building them.
Right. We, in a sense, have to bridge that gap, that sort of time lapse. I'm convinced, and Fishman and I joke about this on the air every week, I'm convinced that a couple of the people that we're talking to right now who are quote-unquote down ballot, and I kind of hate that term, but it's the operative word, the down ballot candidates that we're talking to right now, a number of these folks, I believe, have the potential, with experience, a handful of successes under their belt, and just more practice, have the potential and will be, 8 to 10 years from now, the folks that we're talking about to be our next president and vice presidential candidates. They exist. They are there. They just need opportunity. Go ahead, buddy.
I think you're right. We're looking. So in New York, we had a lot of libertarian victories last year, including what I would call arguably the biggest on paper victory that we've ever had. I wouldn't necessarily say he's the most representative libertarian, but on paper, the Libertarian Party had huge victories. This year, we have assembly candidates, state Senate candidates, congressional candidates, judicial candidates, many of them in winnable races and running really strong with proper support, with opportunity. These are going to be the politicians, not just the perennial candidates, the politicians in office who are guiding policy in New York, who are writing bills in New York, and who are going to slingshot this into something on a more national stage. I agree with you completely. I think we've met our 2028, 2032, 2036. I think I did my math on those years right. Candidates for president.
You know, in when we have more Kara Schultzes out there who are governing, if you will, and I say that word as a libertarian very carefully, but who are, let's just say, mentoring and leading us, as Kara is in the great town of Burnsville, Minnesota. When folks are all of a sudden surrounded by a number of Kara Schultzes who have they maintain a level, it's almost stewardship of the community resources as opposed to a power over them. And that demonstrated capacity to lead by example, and execute effective governance when and only governance needs to take place, then we will have a movement that will truly explode. Because the word libertarian, all of a sudden, we won't be the bogeymen. We won't be those Coke-loving corporatists. The reality of that, of course, is bizarre, because I am aware of no other political movement on the planet that opposes corporate welfare, corporatism, the way that we do. But it's the Kara Schultz of the world who bring life to our philosophy. And people walk away impressed by the maturity of the philosophy, and the maturity of the execution, if you will, of that leadership. That's the holy grail, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And Kara, I can't say enough nice words about Kara. She has been a champion of our victories, a champion, small and big. We won 6 races to we got 10% in a race where we never had run before. We need so many more of her. We need to send as many resources to her as we possibly can. And like I said, as chair, I intend to get as many resources freed up. I want us to be as efficient in the management of the party, so we can use as many resources to get people elected as possible.
Let's close on this note, if you will. It is, pick out a day in the future, it almost doesn't matter. You're standing in front of, if you will, a virtual assemblage of the Libertarian Party as we know it. Not just delegates, but folks who are members, folks who really... I always hearken back in a moment like this, because one of the points that I'll miss in this convention is that special moment, and Nick was very evocative in how he did it. That special moment when everyone is asked to stand, and then convention by convention, folks are asked to sit down when they reach their first convention. And as the crowd starts to thin out, you're left with the folks like the D. Frank Robinsons of the world, the folks who are there from the beginning, literally a lifetime of dedication to the cause. So not only will the quote-unquote delegates be there, not only will be there the latest generation, if you will, of future poobahs of the party, grand exalted rulers, but you're also in front of dozens and dozens and dozens of folks who 30 or 40 years ago marched in parades alone, manned information booths at county fairs alone, were often made sport of because of their provocative views in an era when big government really flowered and brought us to this moment that we find ourselves in today. When you're in front of those folks, what will you say to them when you ask them to your vote? Let's pretend they're here right now and they're listening right now.
I hope they are. I would first thank them. Thank them for bringing a party that so many of us have identified with, for giving so many of us a political home that wouldn't have been there otherwise. I intend to keep that home for their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren. I intend to create an environment where we can grow liberty in this country in all its forms. Take the big victories and the small victories that you fought for so many years. And grow on them. You did 50 years of work to get us to this point. I will not let you down. I will make sure that we are around for 50, 100, 200 years to come.
Tony D'Orazio, he is the candidate for the chairmanship of the LNC and the Libertarian Party. Tony, where can folks find out more about your campaign? Where can they reach out to you? I would imagine that you're going to be in conversation with a number of state and variety of affiliates. And how can those groups get in touch with you if they'd like to have that conversation?
Right now I have a Facebook page, Tony D'Orazio, Libertarian for LNC Chair. You can find that at facebook.com/Tony for FRLP. That's Tony FORLP. That's the easiest way to find me. Tony for LNC at gmail.com is an email address I set up very quickly. You'll find me on almost every social media platform. Just look for Tony D'Orazio. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on Twitter at Tony4NY. You can hit me there. If you send me a direct message with your phone number, I'll give you a phone call and we can have a conversation about why I'm the best choice for chair. I'm happy to talk to any state delegation. I'm actually talking to the Delaware delegation tomorrow, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Excellent. Tony, I want to thank you for taking the time to come on tonight. Folks,
well, thanks for having me, Pat.
We will be putting this in replay. It will also reside on our home at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. I believe I can pin it to that in my personal page. I will extend the invitation for all candidates for LNPC positions if they'd like to join me on the air. A number already have, in fairness. The door is open to all. These are critical times. And I would just ask, not to me, but regardless of who, particularly at the chair and vice chair level, where we're also blessed with great candidates, that be ready to answer the hard questions, because the events of the past few months have created divisiveness, have put roadblocks in our place, and have presented hard questions. And it's my belief that all of them are capable of that. So let's have a great race over the next few weeks, regardless of how and where and when it transpires. And then let's get ready to get back to business. And let's get ready. We've got great candidates. There is a home for every libertarian advocate, every libertarian grassroots supporter, every libertarian volunteer. There is a home for you somewhere. Go back to LPTV and don't listen to me. Listen to the great candidates we've had on the show. And reach out to any one of them. We've covered a good part of the country. My goal on that show is to present every down ballot candidate in the nation an opportunity to be heard between now and November. And if that requires doubling and tripling up, we'll do it. We'll do whatever it takes. But find a home. Now is the time to dig in. We'll get through this convention somehow. We'll work it out. And then, like I said, it's time to get back to work. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, our older site at coalitionradio.us, our newer site at coalitionradionetwork.com. If you're listening to this show for the first time, we just ask you to take a moment. If you could follow us on the Facebook or follow us on the mighty Twitter, we would be ever so grateful. We take every opportunity we can on this little network, little home we've got, to digitally present to you libertarian candidates, philosophies, ideas, supporters, grassroots organizations, think tanks of every type. And all we ask for you is a little bit of your time. Folks, we'll talk shortly. Have a wonderful evening.